My daughter Rebecca stood in her marble entryway, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the brass doorknob, her voice cutting through the sound of rain hammering against her $800,000 suburban home. "Mom, I need you to leave, right now, before David gets back from his business dinner." I looked at the storm raging outside, sheets of rain so heavy I could barely see her BMW in the driveway, then back at my daughter's face. There was no warmth there, no recognition that I was her mother who had worked 3 jobs to pay for the education that bought her this house. Just cold calculation and social embarrassment. "Rebecca, it's pouring rain. Can't we talk about this inside?" "No, we can't. David's partners might drive by. They can't see this." She gestured vaguely at my appearance. The worn coat, the sensible shoes, the hands that showed 40 years of cleaning other people's houses so she could have opportunities one never did. I stepped out into the storm without another word. But before I got in my 15-year-old Honda, I slipped one manila envelope from my purse and set it quietly on her kitchen table. What my daughter found in that envelope at 3 a.m., when guilt finally drove her downstairs for a glass of water, didn't just change her understanding of our relationship. It shattered her entire worldview about sacrifice, love, and what it means to honor the people who build your foundation while you're busy being ashamed of them. Welcome to Family Reckoning. I'm sharing this story today because sometimes the people we sacrifice everything for need a devastating wake-up call to remember where they came from. Drop your city or country in the comments below so I know where my family is watching from. Also, please note this video contains fictionalized elements for storytelling and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or places is purely coincidental, but the message about gratitude and respect runs deeper than fiction. The smell of industrial floor cleaner at 5 a.m. is something that becomes part of your DNA when you've been breathing it for 20 years. It mingles with the scent of fresh coffee brewing in office break rooms and the particular staleness of buildings that hold other people's dreams during the day but belong to the cleaning crew in the pre-dawn darkness. I started working as a commercial cleaner when Rebecca was 8 years old. Her father had left us 2 years earlier, deciding that responsibility for a family was incompatible with his vision of himself as a free-spirited artist. He moved to Portland to find his creative voice and sent birthday cards for exactly 3 years before the guilt apparently became too exhausting to maintain. So it was just Rebecca and me in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, making it work on $24,000 a year plus whatever weekend housecleaning jobs I could pick up for extra income. The mathematics of single parenthood are brutal and unforgiving. Rebecca needed school supplies, clothes that fit, lunch money, field trip fees, and 100 other small expenses that add up to impossible choices between necessities. I worked the overnight shift cleaning office buildings because it paid 50 cents more per hour than day shifts, and that extra $4 a night meant Rebecca could have name-brand cereal instead of the generic version that tasted like cardboard. "Mom, why do you have to work when it's dark outside?" Rebecca would ask when she was 9, watching me get ready for my midnight shift while she did homework at our small kitchen table. "Because that's when the buildings need to be cleaned, sweetheart," I'd tell her, adjusting my uniform and checking that I had enough bus fare for the round trip. "And someone has to do it right. The people who work in those offices deserve to come into a clean, safe space." I was proud of my work. I took pride in making sure every office building I cleaned was spotless, organized, and well-maintained. I learned the routines of dozens of small businesses, ensured their coffee makers were ready for morning, their conference rooms set up properly, their bathways restocked and sanitary. But pride in service work isn't something that translates easily to a 9-year-old who's starting to notice that other kids' mothers wear business suits and attend PDA meetings instead of rushing to night shift jobs. Rebecca was exceptionally bright, not just smart, but intellectually gifted in ways that became apparent early. She read voraciously, excelled in every subject, and possessed a natural curiosity that teachers remembered years later. But more than intelligence, she had ambition. She understood instinctively that education was her pathway to a different kind of life. "Mom," she told me when she was 12, sitting at our kitchen table with a stack of library books about colleges, "I'm going to be the first person in our family to graduate from university. I'm going to get scholarships and study business and make enough money so you never have to clean buildings again." I was incredibly proud of her determination, though I gently tried to help her understand that my work wasn't something I was ashamed of. "Honey, I like what I do. I'm good at it. And it's honest work that's given us what we need. But Mom, you're too smart to be a janitor forever. Once I'm successful, You can stop working so hard. She meant well, but what she was really saying was that my work, the work that was paying for her opportunities, wasn't respectable enough for the family she planned to create. Rebecca earned a full academic scholarship to Ohio State University, studying business administration with plans for corporate finance. I was incredibly proud, the first person in our family to attend college, building the kind of career I dreamed about but never had the opportunity to pursue. College changed her in ways I hadn't anticipated. She came home for Christmas her sophomore year wearing clothes I couldn't afford, speaking with a carefully modulated accent that seemed designed to erase any trace of our working-class background from her voice. "Mom, you should really think about taking some community college courses," she told me during that visit, sitting in our small living room with her laptop open to online degree programs. "Maybe get certified in office management or bookkeeping. You're too intelligent to be doing manual labor." Manual labor. That was how she'd begun referring to 20 years of skilled facility management, not as honest work that had built her opportunities, but as something beneath the person she was becoming. "I appreciate the thought, sweetheart," I said, "but I like what I do. I'm good at it, and it's putting you through college." "Mom, you don't need to sacrifice your potential for me anymore. I'm an adult. You should focus on developing marketable skills." My potential, as though 2 decades of professional cleaning and facility maintenance had been some kind of temporary arrangement until I could become someone more respectable. After graduation, Rebecca landed a position at a prestigious consulting firm downtown. Within 3 years, she was making more money than I'd earned in my best year. She moved into a luxury apartment in the short North District and began socializing with what she called young professionals who understand the importance of networking and personal branding. Our relationship shifted into something that felt more like charity work than family. Rebecca would take me to lunch once a month at restaurants she carefully selected, nice enough to demonstrate her success, but not so upscale that my presence would seem obviously out of place. She'd update me on her career progression, her social circle, her dating life with men who worked at law firms and investment companies. But she stopped asking about my work beyond polite, surface-level questions. "How's the cleaning business, Mom?" she'd ask with the tone someone uses to inquire about a hobby rather than a profession. When I'd mention something interesting, a challenging restoration project, a client relationship I'd built, new equipment I was learning to operate, she'd nod politely and change the subject to something more relevant to her world. The real transformation happened when she met David. David Hartwell came from what Rebecca called an established Columbus family, which meant his grandfather had made money in manufacturing and his family had spent 3 generations converting that wealth into social connections and political influence. He was handsome, ambitious, and possessed the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having to question whether you belong in any room you enter. Rebecca was completely captivated by his world. Within 6 months of dating him, she'd begun modifying her speech patterns, her clothing choices, even her opinions to align with what she perceived as his family's expectations. David's father owns 3 commercial real estate companies, she told me during one of our increasingly infrequent lunches. He's been mentoring me about investment strategies and market positioning. He says I have real potential in commercial development. That sounds wonderful, honey. What kind of development? High-end retail and luxury residential properties. Markets that serve affluent demographics. He says the service industry is becoming increasingly automated, that the real opportunities are in ownership and strategic positioning. The service industry, that was how she'd begun categorizing my 20 years of work, not as skilled facility management that required expertise and dedication, but as part of a broad category of jobs that served other people and therefore held inherently lower status. By their 2nd year of dating, Rebecca had effectively erased my existence from her social life. When David's family hosted dinners or business events, she would attend alone, explaining my absence as scheduling conflicts rather than admitting she was ashamed of her working-class mother. I discovered this by accident when I ran into one of her college friends at a grocery store. "Mrs. Patterson, I was just talking to David last week about Rebecca. He mentioned he's never met her family. You guys must be super busy with work." Never met her family. After 2 years of dating the man she was planning to marry, Rebecca had never introduced me to him. That night I called her. "Rebecca, I think it's time I met David." A long pause. Then, "Mom, it's complicated. David's family moves in very specific social circles. They're business owners, professionals. Their social events tend to focus on networking and relationship building that might not be relevant to your experience. Relevant to my experience. Translation. I wasn't educated enough, sophisticated enough, or wealthy enough to be seen with her without damaging her social positioning. Rebecca, I said quietly, I raised you better than this. Better than what? Mom, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm just being practical about social dynamics. When David and I get married, I'll be joining a family with certain expectations and traditions. I need to be strategic about how I navigate those relationships. Strategic. My daughter was strategically managing my access to her life to ensure I didn't embarrass her in front of people she wanted to impress. We didn't speak for 6 months after that conversation. During those months, something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly, but a kind of clarity about what my relationship with Rebecca had become. She decided that my love and 20 years of sacrifice were worth less than maintaining her image with David's family. But I also realized something else. In all those years of working multiple jobs and making sacrifices to give Rebecca opportunities, I'd never told her the complete story of what those opportunities had cost. I'd protected her from the weight of my choices, but maybe that protection had been a mistake. Maybe it was time she understood exactly what her education and opportunities had required from the mother she was now ashamed to acknowledge. Rebecca called in early October to announce her engagement. I learned about it from a brief, businesslike phone call 3 days after David proposed. Mom, I wanted to let you know that David and I are getting married next spring. We're planning a fairly large celebration. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm happy for you. Thank you. We're still working out details, but I wanted to give you advance notice. There was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't entirely good news for me. Rebecca, am I invited to your wedding? Pause. Of course you're invited. You're my mother. But Mom, I need you to understand that this is going to be a very formal event. David's family is hosting, and their guest list includes some very prominent people. Business leaders, political figures, social influencers. I see. And you're worried about what? Exactly. I'm not worried about anything. I'm just saying it would be helpful if you prepared appropriately. The right attire, appropriate conversation topics, understanding the social protocols. She was asking me to perform, to dress up like someone I wasn't and pretend to belong in a world she'd decided was superior to the one that had raised her. I'll wear something nice, Rebecca. I'll be respectful to your guests. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm not asking you to pretend, Mom. I'm asking you to be mindful of the setting and the company. This is the most important day of my life, and I want everything to be perfect. Perfect. Not perfect for us as a family celebrating her marriage, but perfect for her image with David's social circle. The wedding planning process took 8 months. During that time, Rebecca would occasionally call with updates, always framed as practical information rather than attempts to include me in the celebration. We've booked the Columbus Athletic Club for the reception, she told me during one of these calls. David's family has been members there for 3 generations. It's supposed to be one of the most exclusive venues in the city. Sounds expensive, I said. It's an investment in our future, Rebecca replied. The connections we'll make at this wedding could be invaluable for both our careers. Sometimes you have to spend money to make the right impression. An investment in their future, with no consideration of who had invested in her past or what that investment had required. 2 weeks before the wedding, Rebecca called with what she described as some final logistics. Mom, about the rehearsal dinner. David's parents are hosting it at their country club, but it's really just for immediate family and the wedding party. I think it would be more comfortable for everyone if you joined us at the reception instead. The rehearsal dinner, the event specifically designed for close family members to spend intimate time together before the wedding. I was being excluded from the family celebration of my own daughter's marriage. I understand, I said, though what I understood was that Rebecca had made her choice. She decided that her mother's presence at family events was a liability to be managed rather than a relationship to be honored. Mom, please don't take this personally. It's just that David's grandparents will be there, and some of his father's business associates. The conversations tend to focus on topics that might not be engaging for you, engaging for me, because a woman who'd worked for 20 years and raised a successful daughter couldn't possibly contribute to conversations about family, business, or life experiences. That's when I made my decision about what Rebecca would find on her kitchen table. Before I tell you about the contents of that envelope, and how it completely destroyed Rebecca's carefully constructed worldview at 3 a.m., let me know you're still invested. Comment, "Still here?" or drop 100 points below so I know you're following along. What comes next is where 20 years of hidden sacrifice met one moment of devastating recognition. And just a heads up, the following events incorporate some dramatic storytelling elements for educational purposes. If that's not your style, feel free to click away now. But if you want to see how entitled children learn the true cost of their opportunities, let's keep going. The night Rebecca kicked me out of her house, I'd driven over to drop off her wedding gift. A pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother, the only valuable thing I'd inherited and had been saving for Rebecca's wedding day. I'd called ahead, but Rebecca seemed distracted on the phone. "Mom, David's having an important business dinner tonight with some potential investors. Can you make it quick?" I should have recognized the warning signs in her voice, the slight edge, the way she said, "Make it quick," like I was a service provider rather than her mother. But I was focused on the gift, on the story I wanted to share about my mother wearing those pearls to her own wedding in 1962. When I arrived at Rebecca's house at 7:30 p.m., she answered the door in an expensive cocktail dress, clearly preparing for David's dinner party. "Mom, I thought you were just dropping something off," she said, not inviting me inside despite the rain that had started falling. "I wanted to give you this in person," I said, holding up the small jewelry box. "It was your grandmother's. I thought you'd like to know the story behind it." "That's sweet, but Mom, this really isn't a good time. David's associates will be arriving any minute, and I need to finish preparing." I could see past her into the house. Candles lit, expensive wine breathing on the counter, classical music playing softly. It was the kind of elegant dinner party I'd never been invited to, even though my work had paid for the education that made such entertaining possible. "Rebecca, it'll just take a minute. I drove all the way over here in the rain. And I appreciate that, but you should have checked with me first. I told you David was having people over tonight." She was treating me like an uninvited solicitor rather than her mother who'd called ahead and driven 20 minutes in a storm to bring her a family heirloom. "Sweetheart, I'm not asking to join your party. I just wanted to give you this gift and tell you about your grandmother." "Mom, you're not listening. This is a crucial business dinner. David's trying to secure funding for a major commercial development project. These people are investors, decision makers. They're not used to." "They're not used to what, Rebecca?" "They're not used to casual visitors. They expect a certain level of formality and sophistication." Casual visitors. I was a casual visitor to my own daughter's home. That's when I heard David's voice from inside the house. "Becca, is everything okay?" The Williamses just pulled into the driveway. Rebecca's face went pale. The Williamses, presumably the investors David was trying to impress, were about to see her talking to a woman in a worn coat and sensible shoes on her front porch. "Mom, you need to go. Right now. I can't have them see." "See what, Rebecca?" "See your mother. See this situation. It sends the wrong message about our family background and social positioning. The wrong message. My existence sent the wrong message about the family that had raised her." I stood there in the increasing rain, looking at my daughter's beautiful face contorted with embarrassment and social anxiety, and I felt something break inside me that had been cracking for months. "Please, Mom, just go. We can talk about the necklace later." "When later? After your wedding? After you've established yourself firmly enough in David's social circle that acknowledging your mother won't damage your reputation?" "Mom, don't be dramatic. This is just bad timing." "Rebecca, look at me. Really look at me. I'm your mother. I worked 3 jobs for 20 years to give you the opportunities that bought you this house and this lifestyle. And you're asking me to leave because my presence might embarrass you in front of people you want to impress." I could see David's silhouette in the hallway, clearly agitated about the delay in greeting his important guests. "Mom, please, just go. Before they see you here." Those words, "before they see you here," were the final break in whatever remained of my tolerance for her disrespect. I looked at Rebecca standing in her marble entryway, her hand on the brass doorknob, her face filled with cold calculation about social optics rather than any warmth for the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her this life. "All right, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I'll go." I walked back to my Honda in the rain, set the jewelry box on her kitchen table as I'd planned, and drove home through the storm with 20 years of suppressed hurt finally rising to the surface. But I'd left more than just a necklace on that table. The manila envelope contained something Rebecca had never seen. Complete documentation of every sacrifice, every choice, every dollar I'd spent to build her opportunities, while she was busy being ashamed of the woman who'd made them possible. The envelope contained 23 years of carefully preserved records, bank statements, pay stubs, receipts, and handwritten letters I'd never sent, but had written to process my own feelings during the hardest years of single motherhood. The first section was financial documentation. Every receipt for Rebecca's school clothes, field trip fees, college application costs, textbooks, and the 1,000 small expenses that had shaped my budget for 2 decades. But more than receipts, I'd included bank statements showing the deposits from my various jobs, the overnight cleaning shifts, the weekend house cleaning, the holiday jobs I'd taken at retail stores to earn extra money for Rebecca's opportunities. December 1998, $127 from cleaning offices, $85 from weekend house cleaning, $45 from gift wrapping at the department store. Total monthly income, $892. Rebecca's Christmas gifts, $78. Rent, $425. Utilities, $67. Groceries, $89. Remaining, $233 for everything else. March 2003. Extra shifts during Rebecca's spring break, so she could go on the school trip to Washington, D.C., worked 73 hours that week. Rebecca's trip fee, $340. My monthly income after covering her expenses, $156. October 2006. Rebecca's college application fees, SAT prep course and graduation dress. Total cost, $1,200. Took loan against my retirement account to cover it. But the most devastating part of the envelope wasn't the financial records. It was the letters. I'd written them during the years when Rebecca was growing up, during the moments when I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising her alone, when I needed to process my feelings but couldn't burden her with the weight of my choices. Dear Rebecca, you're 15 today. I missed your birthday party because I was working a double shift to pay for your SAT prep course. When I got home at midnight, you'd saved me a piece of cake and left a note saying you understood. But I could see the disappointment in your eyes when I wasn't there to watch you blow out the candles. I want you to know that missing your party was the hardest thing I've ever done. I want you to know that I would rather have been nowhere else in the world than celebrating with you. But I also want you to know that working that shift meant you'll have every opportunity to succeed, and that trade-off is one I'll make gladly every time. Dear Rebecca, your guidance counselor called today to talk about college applications. She says you have the potential to get into any university in the country. I cried after that phone call. Not from sadness, but from pride. You are everything I dreamed you could become. Sometimes when I'm working late-night shifts and I'm exhausted and my back hurts, I remind myself that every hour I work is an investment in your future. Every sacrifice is worth it because you're going to have opportunities one never imagined. Dear Rebecca, you're graduating from college in 2 months. I bought my plane ticket to Columbus today, the first time I've ever flown anywhere. I'm nervous about the ceremony, nervous about meeting your professors and classmates, nervous that I'll somehow embarrass you, but I'm also proud beyond words. You did it. You became the first person in our family to earn a degree, and you did it with honors. Everything I gave up was worth this moment. The final section of the envelope contains something I'd never shown Rebecca. Documentation of all the opportunities I'd turned down to ensure her success. Job offers I'd declined because they would have required relocating during her high school years. Evening classes I'd wanted to take but couldn't afford because Rebecca's needs came first. A small business opportunity in 2005 that would have required startup capital. Money I instead spent on Rebecca's college expenses. A letter from a community college offering me a scholarship for a business management program, which I turned down because the class schedule would have conflicted with Rebecca's high school graduation and college preparation. I'd also included copies of commendations from my various employers, performance reviews that showed I'd been promoted repeatedly, documentation that I'd been offered supervisory positions and additional responsibilities throughout my career. Rebecca had assumed I'd remained a janitor because that was my intellectual ceiling. The reality was that I'd remained in positions that gave me the scheduling flexibility and financial stability to prioritize her needs over my own career advancement. The last item in the envelope was a letter I'd written but never sent, dated just 1 week before she kicked me out in the rain. Rebecca, I've been thinking about your wedding, about how proud I am of the woman you've become, about how excited I am to see you start your own family with David. I know you're worried about how I'll fit into your new life, whether I'll understand the social expectations of your husband's family and friends. I want you to know that you don't need to manage me or prepare me or worry about my ability to represent our family appropriately. I understand more about sacrifice, dedication, and family values than most of the people you're trying to impress. I built those values through 20 years of putting your needs before my own, and I'm proud of that choice. I hope someday you'll be proud of it too, instead of ashamed of the woman who made it. At 3:17 a.m., Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. Mom, can you please come over? We need to talk. I'd been lying awake since midnight, not sleeping, not really thinking, just existing in the quiet space that comes after you've finally said everything that needed to be said. I drove back to Rebecca's house through empty streets. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and still. Rebecca was waiting on her front porch in a bathrobe, the manila envelope open in her lap, papers scattered around her like the debris from an explosion. She'd been crying. Her face was swollen, her carefully styled hair disheveled, her composure completely destroyed. Mom, she said when I walked up the steps. I read everything. I sat down beside her on the porch swing David had installed last summer, the same porch where she'd asked me to leave because my presence might embarrass her. And I've been the worst daughter in the world. For years. I've been horrible to you. We sat in silence for a few minutes, surrounded by 20 years of documented sacrifice that Rebecca was finally able to see. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you show me these letters, these receipts, the records of what you were doing for me? Because I didn't want you to feel guilty about the choices I made gladly. I wanted you to focus on building your future, not worrying about what I was giving up to make it possible. But I thought you didn't care about being involved in my life. I thought work was more important to you than I was. Work was never more important than you, Rebecca. Work was how I showed you that you were the most important thing in my life. Every extra shift, every weekend job, every opportunity one turned down, that wasn't absence. That was presence in a different form. Rebecca was crying again, the kind of deep, body-shaking tears that come when someone realizes they've been fundamentally wrong about something that matters. Mom, I'm so ashamed. I've spent years being embarrassed by you, trying to hide you from David and his family, treating you like you were somehow less valuable than the people I wanted to impress. I know. How can you forgive me? How can you even look at me after what I said tonight, after how I've treated you? I reached over and took her hand, the way I'd done when she was small and frightened by bad dreams. Because you're my daughter, Rebecca. Because I didn't sacrifice everything to build your future just so I could withdraw my love when you made mistakes. Because even when you were breaking my heart, I was still proud of the woman you'd become. But I haven't become a good woman, Mom. I've become someone who's ashamed of her own mother. Someone who values social status more than family loyalty. Someone who's forgotten where she came from and who got her there. Those are choices you can change, sweetheart. Starting right now. Rebecca looked down at the scattered papers. 20 years of evidence that her opportunities had been built on her mother's sacrifices. Mom, I want to introduce you to David. Not because I'm managing the situation or preparing you to be acceptable to his family. I want him to meet you because you're the most impressive woman I know. And I'm ashamed that I've been too selfish to see it. I'd like that too, honey. And Mom, I want David's family to understand who raised me. I want them to know that I come from people who understand the value of hard work and sacrifice. I want them to respect that, and if they can't, then they're not the kind of people I want to be associated with anyway. 3 months later, I had dinner with Rebecca, David, and his parents. David's father, a successful businessman, was genuinely interested in hearing about my work managing commercial facilities. He asked thoughtful questions about operational efficiency, staff management, and the technical skills required for facility oversight. You know, he said during dessert, the people who actually keep businesses running are the backbone of the economy. Everything else is just commentary. Rebecca reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. 6 months later, at their wedding, Rebecca asked me to give a speech about love and family. I talked about how real love shows up even when it's inconvenient, even when it requires sacrifice, even when it looks like absence but is actually the deepest form of presence. But more importantly, Rebecca had learned something about respect and gratitude. She'd learned that a person's worth isn't measured by their job title or social status, but by their character, their dedication, and the love they show through their actions. She'd learned that the most valuable things in life are often given by people who don't have much to give, and that sacrifice is only visible to those who care enough to look for it. If there's one thing this experience taught me about parenting and family relationships, it's this: document your love. Keep records of the choices you make for your children's benefit. Not because you plan to use them as evidence someday, but because children often can't see love while it's happening. Sometimes love looks like absence that enables presence later. Sometimes love looks like exhaustion that creates opportunities. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice that seems selfish until you understand what was being sacrificed and why. To every parent who's working multiple jobs to provide opportunities for their children, your children may not see your sacrifice now, but that doesn't make it worthless. Keep records. Document your choices. Write down the reasons behind the long hours and the missed moments. And to every adult child who's ever been ashamed of a parent's work, ask questions. Look deeper. Try to understand the full context of the choices that shaped your childhood. Sometimes the parent you think doesn't belong in your social circle actually built the foundation that allows you to stand in that circle at all. These family stories aren't easy to share. It requires admitting that love sometimes hurts, that good intentions can be misunderstood, and that the people we love most can sometimes hurt us the deepest. But I believe they need to be told because there are millions of parents out there sacrificing their own comfort and wondering if their children will ever understand that every choice was made out of love. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever misjudged someone's sacrifice or had your own sacrifice go unrecognized, I want you to know, love creates its own evidence. The truth always emerges, even if it takes 20 years and a rainy night for it to be seen. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it helped you understand something about sacrifice, gratitude, or the complex ways we show love, please share it. Subscribe to Family Reckoning so you never miss another story about families learning to see each other clearly. And remember, sometimes the most profound love is invisible until someone cares enough to document it and brave enough to reveal it. Note: this story contains dramatic elements created for educational and entertainment purposes. While based on real patterns of parental sacrifice and family ingratitude, specific details have been crafted to illustrate important principles about love and recognition. Always seek professional guidance for serious family relationship issues.